Sarah Martinez pushed her cleaning cart down the long hallway of the Steinway Concert Hall. Her feet hurt from working all day, and she still had 3 more hours before she could go home. The wheels of her cart made a soft, squeaking sound on the marble floor. She had been working at this fancy music hall for 3 years now, and she knew every corner of the building. The concert hall was beautiful. Gold decorations covered the walls, and crystal lights hung from the high ceiling. Rich people came here every night to listen to classical music. They wore expensive clothes and talked in quiet voices about things Sarah did not understand. She always felt like she did not belong in such a fancy place. Sarah was 42 years old and had 2 children at home. Emma was 15 and little. Miguel was only 8. They were waiting for her to come home with dinner. She worked 2 jobs to pay for their small apartment and to buy food and clothes. Life was not easy, but she did what she had to do for her kids every evening. Sarah cleaned the main concert hall after the last show ended. This was her favorite part of the job, even though it was also the hardest. The concert hall was huge, with hundreds of red velvet seats that needed to be wiped down. The stage was big and covered with a dark wooden floor that had to be mopped carefully, but the most beautiful thing in the whole concert hall was the grand piano. It sat in the center of the stage like a sleeping giant. The piano was black and shiny, and it cost more money than Sarah would make in her whole life. She had been told never to touch it, only to dust around it very carefully. Every night Sarah would save the piano for last. She would take her soft yellow cloth and gently clean the outside of the piano. She would dust the bench where the piano players sat. Sometimes she would look at the keys and wonder what it would feel like to press them, but she never did. She was just the cleaning lady. Sarah had watched hundreds of concerts from the back of the hall while she worked. She would try to stay quiet and not bother anyone. The music was always beautiful, but sometimes it made her feel sad for reasons she could not explain. When the piano players performed, she would stop working and listen. She knew she should not do this, but she could not help herself. The piano players who came to the concert hall were very talented. They wore fancy black clothes and had confident smiles. They would walk onto the stage like they owned the place. Their fingers would move so fast on the keys that Sarah could barely see them. The music they made was like magic. Some of the piano players were kind to Sarah. They would nod at her or say hello when they saw her cleaning. But most of them did not notice her at all. To them, she was invisible. She was just part of the background, like the chairs or the walls. Sarah did not mind being invisible most of the time. It was easier that way. She could do her job without anyone bothering her. She could listen to the beautiful music without anyone telling her to leave. She could pretend, just for a few minutes each night, that she belonged in this world of music and beauty, but sometimes being invisible made her feel lonely. She would go home to her small apartment and cook dinner for her children. They would tell her about their day at school, and she would help them with their homework. Then she would fall asleep thinking about the music she had heard that night. Emma, her older daughter, was getting good grades in school. She wanted to go to college someday. Sarah was proud of her, but she worried about how to pay for college. The money she made from cleaning was just enough to pay for rent and food. There was nothing left over for dreams. Miguel was different from his sister. He was a happy boy who loved to draw and sing. Sometimes he would make up little songs and sing them while Sarah cooked dinner. He had a beautiful voice, but Sarah knew she could not afford music lessons for him. She felt bad about this, but there was nothing she could do. On this particular Friday night, Sarah was more tired than usual. She had worked extra hours at her morning job cleaning offices downtown. Her back hurt, and her hands were dry and cracked from all the cleaning chemicals she used. She wanted to finish quickly and go home to her children. The concert that night had been longer than usual. A famous piano player had performed pieces by Chopin and Mozart. Sarah had listened while she cleaned the lobby. The music was so beautiful that it made her forget about her tired feet and sore back. For those 2 hours, she had felt like she was somewhere else, somewhere magical. Now the concert hall was empty except for Sarah. The audience had gone home to their big houses and comfortable lives. The musicians had packed up their instruments and left in expensive cars. Only Sarah remained, pushing her cart toward the stage to begin the final part of her work. She looked at the grand piano sitting alone on the stage. Under the bright stage lights, it looked even more beautiful than usual. Sarah wondered what it would feel like to sit on the bench and put her fingers on the keys. She wondered what kind of sound she would make if she pressed down on them, but these were dangerous thoughts and Sarah pushed them away. She was just the cleaning lady. Piano playing was for other people, people who had money and education and talent. People who were not like her. Sarah plugged in her vacuum cleaner and began to clean the stage. Tomorrow night, another pianist would come and make beautiful music. The rich people would come back to listen and applaud. And Sarah would be there, invisible in the background, cleaning and listening and dreaming dreams she could never have. She did not know that tomorrow night would change her life forever. Jonathan Blackwell arrived at the concert hall in the black limousine. He was 35 years old and one of the most famous piano players in the world. He had played in the best concert halls in London, Paris, and New York. Tomorrow night, he would perform at Carnegie Hall, the most important concert hall in America. Jonathan was tall and thin, with dark hair that he kept perfectly neat. He wore expensive suits and shiny leather shoes. His hands were soft and white because he never did any hard work. He had been rich all his life, and he expected everyone to treat him like he was very important. The truth was, Jonathan was not a very nice person. He thought he was better than everyone else. He was rude to waiters in restaurants and mean to people who worked for him. He believed that only rich and educated people mattered. Poor people, in his mind, were not worth his time. Jonathan walked into the concert hall like he owned it. Behind him came his manager, a nervous man named Robert, who always agreed with everything Jonathan said. There were also 3 music critics who wrote about classical music for newspapers, and 2 rich people who gave money to help musicians. This place will do, Jonathan said, looking around the concert hall. He said this like he was doing them a favor by playing there. The truth was, the Steinway Concert Hall was one of the best in the city, and many famous musicians wanted to play there. Jonathan walked onto the stage and sat at the grand piano. He did not say thank you to anyone. He just started playing to test the piano and make sure it sounded good. His fingers moved quickly over the keys, playing difficult pieces that showed off his skill. The small group of people sat in the front row and listened. They nodded their heads and whispered to each other about how talented Jonathan was. He liked when people talked about how good he was. It made him feel powerful and important. "The piano is acceptable," Jonathan announced after playing for 10 minutes. He stood up and brushed imaginary dust off his hands. "We will begin the rehearsal. Now, I want to practice the pieces I will play tomorrow night." Jonathan sat back down and began to play Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto. No, too, it was a very difficult piece that required great skill. His fingers flew over the keys, creating beautiful and complicated music. Even though he was not a nice person, he was truly talented at playing piano. While Jonathan played, Sarah was cleaning the seats in the back of the concert hall. She tried to be very quiet so she would not disturb the rehearsal. She had learned to move like a ghost when musicians were practicing. Most of the time, they did not even know she was there. But tonight was different. Sarah found herself stopping her work to listen to the music. The piece Jonathan was playing was one of her favorites, though she had never told anyone this. She knew every note, every change in rhythm, every soft and loud part. As she listened, her fingers began to move slightly, as if she was playing along with him. Sarah did not notice that she was moving her fingers. She was lost in the music, remembering things she had tried very hard to forget. The beautiful sounds filled her heart with feelings she had buried deep inside. Many years ago, Jonathan finished the piece and looked up at his small audience. They clapped their hands and said nice things about his playing. He smiled with satisfaction. He loved being praised and admired. "Now I will play Chopin's Ballade No. 1, Jonathan announced. This was the most difficult piece he would play tomorrow night. It was a piece that required not just technical skill, but deep feeling and understanding. As Jonathan began to play the Chopin piece, Sarah stopped moving completely. This piece meant something very special to her, though no one in the world knew why. She stood behind the last row of seats, holding her cleaning cloth, completely still. Jonathan played the piece well, but something was missing. He had the technical skill, but the music did not have the deep emotion that made it truly beautiful. He played the notes correctly, but he did not understand what the music was really about. Sarah could hear what was wrong, but of course she said nothing. She was just the cleaning lady. Who was she to judge a famous musician? When Jonathan finished the Chopin piece, one of the music critics spoke up. "Beautiful playing as always," the man said. "But I wonder if you might consider adding more emotional depth to the ballade. It is such a passionate piece." Jonathan's face became angry. He did not like being criticized, even in a polite way. "I have been playing Chopin longer than you have been writing about music," he said coldly. "I think I know how to interpret his work." The critic looked embarrassed and said nothing more. The other people in the group shifted uncomfortably in their seats. They all knew that Jonathan had a bad temper, but they needed to stay on his good side for business reasons. Jonathan stood up from the piano bench and walked around the stage. He was angry about the criticism, and he wanted to make someone else feel bad to make himself feel better. That was when he noticed Sarah cleaning in the back of the hall. "You there?" Jonathan called out loudly. His voice echoed through the empty concert hall. Sarah looked up, surprised that he was talking to her. She had been trying so hard to be invisible. "Yes, sir?" Sarah said quietly. She was not sure what he wanted, but she could tell from his tone that he was not happy about something. Jonathan smiled, but it was not a kind smile. It was the smile of someone who was about to do something mean. "Come here," he said. "I want to ask you something." Sarah put down her cleaning cloth and walked slowly toward the stage. She felt nervous because everyone was looking at her. The rich people and music critics stared at her like she was some kind of strange animal. "What is your name?" Jonathan asked when Sarah reached the edge of the stage. "Sarah Martinez, sir," she answered quietly. "Well, Sarah Martinez," Jonathan said, making her name sound like something dirty. "You have been listening to my rehearsal, haven't you?" Sarah felt her face get hot with embarrassment. "I'm sorry, sir. I was trying to be quiet. I can come back later if you want." No, Jonathan said, waving his hand. "I'm curious about something. You listen to classical music every night while you clean, don't you?" "Yes, sir," Sarah said. She did not understand where this conversation was going, but she felt like she was in trouble. Jonathan turned to look at his audience, making sure they were all paying attention to what he was about to do. "Tell me, Sarah," he said in a loud voice, "after listening to all this music, do you think playing piano is easy?" Sarah felt confused by the question. "No, sir," she said. "I think it must be very difficult. It takes many years of study and practice." Jonathan said, pretending to think about her answer. "But surely you must have some opinions about how the music should be played. After all, you hear it every night." The people in the audience began to understand what Jonathan was doing. He was making fun of the cleaning lady to entertain them and to make himself feel better about the critic's comment. Some of them looked uncomfortable, but none of them said anything to stop him. "I don't know anything about music, sir," Sarah said. "I just clean." "Oh, but I think you're being modest," Jonathan said with his mean smile. "I bet you think you could do better than some of the musicians you hear. I bet you think it looks easy when you watch us play." Sarah shook her head. "No, sir, I would never think that." But Jonathan was not finished with his cruel game. He was enjoying making her uncomfortable in front of all these important people. It made him feel powerful and in control again. "You know what I think?" Jonathan said, his voice getting louder. "I think we should give you a chance to show us what you can do." Sarah's heart began to beat very fast. She looked at Jonathan's face and saw the mean smile that told her he was not being kind. This was not a real invitation. This was a trap meant to embarrass her in front of all these important people. "I don't understand, sir," Sarah said quietly. She hoped that if she acted confused, he would leave her alone and let her go back to her cleaning. but Jonathan was enjoying himself too much to stop now. He had an audience of important people, and he wanted to show them how clever and superior he was. Making fun of the cleaning lady would prove that he was better than everyone else, especially better than the critic who had dared to question his playing. "It's simple," Jonathan said, speaking loud enough for everyone in the concert hall to hear. "You come up here on this stage, sit at this piano, and show us how easy it is to play classical music. After all, you've been watching us do it for 3 years. Surely you've learned something." The people in the audience looked at each other with uncomfortable expressions. They knew this was cruel, but Jonathan was too famous and powerful for them to say anything against him. They needed his friendship for their careers and their business deals. Robert, Jonathan's manager, tried to speak up. "Jonathan, maybe we should continue with the rehearsal. We have a lot of work to do before tomorrow night." "Nonsense," Jonathan said, waving his hand. "This will only take a minute. Our cleaning lady here is going to entertain us with her musical talents." Sarah felt sick to her stomach. She knew that Jonathan was making fun of her, but she also knew she could not just walk away. He was too important, and she needed this job. If she made him angry, he could get her fired. Then how would she feed her children? "Sir, I really don't know how to play piano," Sarah said. "I think there has been a misunderstanding." "Oh, I don't think so," Jonathan said. His voice was getting louder and more excited. "I've seen the way you stop and listen when we play. I've seen how you move your fingers sometimes. You think you know something about music, don't you?" Sarah felt her face burning with shame. She had not realized that anyone had noticed her listening or moving her fingers. She thought she had been invisible, but apparently Jonathan had been watching her. "Please, sir," Sarah said. "I just listen because the music is beautiful. I don't know anything about playing," but Jonathan was not going to let her escape. He turned to face his audience and spoke to them like Sarah was not even there. "Ladies and gentlemen, what we have here is a perfect example of the problem with society today. Everyone thinks they're an expert. Everyone thinks they can do what we do." The music critics and rich people nodded their heads even though they felt uncomfortable. They knew Jonathan was being cruel, but they also knew he was very powerful in the music world. "This woman," Jonathan continued, pointing at Sarah, "listens to classical music while she mops floors and thinks she understands it. She probably goes home and tells her friends that she could play piano if she just had the chance." Sarah wanted to run away, but her feet felt frozen to the floor. She had never told anyone that she sometimes dreamed about playing piano. She had never said that she thought she could do it. But somehow Jonathan had guessed her secret thoughts, and now he was using them to hurt her. "So here's what we're going to do," Jonathan announced. "We're going to give our cleaning lady her big chance. Sarah, come up on this stage and sit at this piano. Play us something beautiful. Show us that all those years of listening have taught you something." The people in the audience started to whisper to each other. Some of them looked excited, like they were about to watch something entertaining. Others looked worried, like they knew this was wrong but did not know how to stop it. Sarah looked at the stage, then at the piano, then at all the faces staring at her. She felt like a mouse trapped by a cat. There was nowhere to run and no way to escape what was about to happen. "I can't, sir," Sarah said one more time. "I really don't know how." "Nonsense," Jonathan said. "Everyone can bang on piano keys. That's all most people think we do anyway. Come on, don't be shy. This is your moment to shine." Sarah knew she had no choice. If she refused, Jonathan would make her life miserable. He might even get her fired. She thought about Emma and Miguel at home, waiting for her to bring dinner. She thought about the rent that was due next week and the school supplies her children needed. Slowly, Sarah began to walk toward the stage. Each step felt like it took forever. The people in the audience watched her like she was walking to her execution. Some of them looked sorry for her, but none of them tried to help her. When Sarah reached the stage, she stopped. The piano looked enormous up close. The black and white keys seemed to stretch on forever. The bench where she was supposed to sit looked like a throne that belonged to someone much more important than her. Go on, Jonathan said. He was standing beside the piano now, his arms crossed over his chest. Sit down. Make yourself comfortable. Sarah's hands were shaking as she approached the piano bench. She had cleaned around this piano hundreds of times, but she had never sat at it. She had never been this close to the keys. She sat down carefully on the edge of the bench. The seat was soft and comfortable, much nicer than any chair she had at home. She looked down at the keys and felt dizzy. They were so clean and white, like teeth in a giant's mouth. Well, Jonathan said impatiently, we're waiting. Play us something, anything. Just press some keys and make some noise. Sarah put her hands in her lap and stared at the piano keys. She could feel everyone watching her. She could hear her own heart beating in her ears. This was the most embarrassing moment of her entire life. I'm waiting, Jonathan said again. His voice was getting impatient now. Surely you can manage to hit a few keys. It's not rocket science. Sarah thought about getting up and running away. She thought about telling Jonathan that she was just a cleaning lady and this was not fair. She thought about all the reasons why she should not be sitting at this piano, but then something strange happened. As Sarah stared at the keys, she began to remember things she had tried very hard to forget. She remembered small hands reaching for piano keys in a different place a long time ago. She remembered the feeling of music flowing through her fingers like water. Sarah took a deep breath. She had spent 20 years running away from who she used to be. She had buried her past so deep that sometimes she forgot it existed. But sitting at this piano, with everyone watching and waiting, the memories came flooding back. Any time now, Jonathan said sarcastically. We don't have all night. Sarah looked up at him, and for the first time since this horrible experience began, she did not look afraid. Something had changed in her eyes. Something that had been sleeping for 20 years was starting to wake up. What would you like me to play? Sarah asked quietly. Jonathan laughed out loud. Oh, now she's asking for requests. How about Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star? That seems about right for your skill level. But Sarah was not listening to his mean words anymore. She was looking at the keys and remembering things that Jonathan could never understand. She was remembering who she used to be before life forced her to become someone else. Actually, Sarah said, her voice getting stronger, I think I'll play something else. She lifted her hands and placed them gently on the keys. For the first time in 20 years, her fingers touched piano keys. The feeling was like coming home after a very long journey. Sarah's fingers rested on the piano keys for a moment that felt like forever. The cold, smooth surface of the keys brought back memories that hit her like a wave. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath. 20 years of hiding, 20 years of pretending to be someone else, 20 years of silence were about to end. The people in the audience expected her to press a few keys randomly and make terrible sounds. They expected her to be embarrassed and run away. Jonathan expected to have a good laugh at her expense and prove how much better he was than ordinary people. None of them were prepared for what happened. Next, Sarah began to play Chopin's Ballade No. 1 in G minor. The same piece that Jonathan had just played, but from the very first note, everyone could tell that something was different. This was not the stumbling attempt of someone who had never played piano before. This was not random noise from someone trying to copy what they had seen. This was the sound of a master. The opening notes were soft and gentle, like a whisper that draws you closer. Sarah's fingers moved across the keys with perfect control. Every note was exactly where it should be, exactly as loud or soft as it needed to be. The music that came from the piano was not just correct, it was beautiful. Jonathan's smile disappeared from his face. He had expected Sarah to embarrass herself, but instead she was playing one of the most difficult pieces in all of classical music, and she was playing it perfectly. The people in the audience stopped whispering to each other. They sat forward in their seats, not believing what they were hearing. The cleaning lady, the invisible woman who mopped their floors and emptied their trash cans, was playing piano like a professional musician, but Sarah was just getting started. As she moved into the second section of the ballade, her playing became even more beautiful. Her fingers danced across the keys like they had been doing this every day for years. The music told a story of sadness and hope, of dreams lost and found again. Sarah's whole body seemed to change as she played. The tired cleaning lady disappeared, and in her place sat a true artist. Her back was straight, her movements were graceful, and her face showed the deep concentration of someone who understood music not just with their mind, but with their heart. The audience was completely silent now. Even Jonathan, who had started this as a cruel joke, found himself unable to speak. He had played this same piece just minutes before, but compared to what Sarah was doing, his performance seemed cold and empty. Sarah continued playing, her confidence growing with every measure. Her fingers found every note without hesitation, as if the music was flowing directly from her soul to the keys. The melody soared and dipped, told stories of love and loss, painted pictures in sound that made everyone listening feel things they had not felt in years. Robert, Jonathan's manager, rubbed his eyes and looked again, thinking he must be dreaming. The music critics, who had heard thousands of performances in their careers, sat with their mouths open. The rich people who came to concerts just to be seen forgot all about their social status and simply listened with wonder. As Sarah played, memories flooded back to her. She remembered being 16 years old, sitting at a piano just like this one, in a concert hall far away. She remembered the feeling of the music flowing through her, the joy of making something beautiful with her own hands. She remembered the applause, the flowers, the reviews in newspapers that called her a genius, but she also remembered why she had to stop. She remembered the night everything changed, the night she had to choose between her music and her family's safety. She remembered packing her things and leaving everything behind, including her real name and her dreams of being a concert pianist. Now, sitting at this piano, Sarah felt like she was talking to an old friend who had been waiting for her to come home. The keys knew her fingers, and her fingers remembered every song they had ever played together. The ballade was building to its most difficult section now. This was the part where even professional pianists sometimes made mistakes. The notes came fast and complicated, requiring years of training and perfect technique. Jonathan waited for Sarah to stumble, to prove that this was all just luck, but Sarah did not stumble. Her left hand played the deep, rolling bass notes while her right hand danced through the melody high above. The two hands worked together like they were having a conversation, one voice answering the other, both parts coming together to create something bigger than either could make alone. The people watching began to realize that this was not just good playing. This was extraordinary playing. This was the kind of performance that people remembered for the rest of their lives. The cleaning lady was not just playing the notes correctly, she was making the piano sing with emotion and beauty that took their breath away. Sarah's face was peaceful now, almost happy. For the first time in 20 years, she was doing what she was born to do. Her hands moved across the keys like they were floating, making the most difficult passages look easy. She was not just playing the music, she was living inside it, breathing it, becoming one with it. Jonathan stood frozen beside the piano, his face pale with shock. He had studied this piece for months to prepare for his Carnegie Hall performance. He had worked with the best teachers money could buy. But in just a few minutes, this woman, this cleaning lady, was showing him what the music really meant. The audience was completely under Sarah's spell now. Some of them had tears in their eyes. Others leaned forward as if they could get closer to the magic that was happening on stage. All of them knew they were witnessing something special, something they would never forget. As Sarah moved toward the climax of the piece, her playing became even more powerful. The music filled every corner of the concert hall, every heart in the audience. It spoke of struggles overcome, of talents that could not be buried no matter how hard life tried to hide them. Sarah's cleaning uniform seemed to disappear. The tired woman who had walked onto this stage a few minutes ago was gone. In her place sat an artist, a musician, a master of her craft who had been hiding in plain sight for 20 years. The piano responded to her touch, like it was grateful to finally be played by someone who truly understood it. Every note rang clear and true, every phrase shaped with perfect timing and feeling. This was not just technical skill, This was art of the highest level. Jonathan began to understand that he had made a terrible mistake. He had thought he was embarrassing a simple cleaning lady, but instead he had awakened something magnificent. He had expected to prove his superiority, but instead he was seeing what real musical genius looked like. The people in the audience forgot about their phones, their schedules, their important business meetings. They forgot about everything except the incredible music that was washing over them like a healing river. They were witnessing a miracle, and they knew it. Sarah approached the final section of the ballade, the part that would determine whether this performance would be merely good or truly great. Her fingers prepared for the last burst of technical difficulty, the final test of 20 years of silence. As she began the ending, Sarah knew that her old life was over. She could never go back to being invisible, never pretend again that she was just a cleaning lady. The music had set her free, and there was no going back to the cage where she had hidden for so long. The final notes were coming now, and with them the end of the longest 20 years of Sarah's life. As Sarah continued to play, the memories came flooding back like a river that had broken through a dam. She was no longer Sarah Martinez, the cleaning lady with tired hands and worn shoes. She was Sarah Chun again, the girl who had amazed the world with her musical gifts before everything fell apart. Sarah had been born in San Francisco to Chinese immigrant parents. Her father owned a small restaurant, and her mother taught piano lessons to neighborhood children. When Sarah was 4 years old, her mother noticed that she could play any song perfectly after hearing it just once. By the time she was 6, Sarah was playing pieces that most adults could not master. Her parents saved every penny to buy her a good piano and pay for the best teachers. They believed their daughter was special, that music was her destiny. Sarah's gift grew stronger every year. She won every competition she entered. Music schools fought to have her as a student. When Sarah was 12, she performed with the San Francisco Symphony Orchestra. The newspapers called her a miracle, a once-in-a-generation talent. Famous musicians came to hear her play and went away shaking their heads in amazement. Everyone said she would become one of the greatest pianists who ever lived. At 16, Sarah won the International Chopin competition in Warsaw, Poland. She was the youngest winner in the competition's history. The whole world of classical music knew her name. Record companies wanted to sign her. Concert halls around the world invited her to perform. Sarah's life was perfect. She had everything a young musician could dream of: talent, fame, and a bright future ahead of her. She was going to study at the best music schools in America and Europe. She was going to travel the world, sharing her gift with audiences everywhere. But then her father started drinking too much. At first, it was just a few beers after work at the restaurant. Then it became a bottle of wine with dinner. Then it became whiskey hidden in the kitchen, vodka in the bathroom, bottles everywhere that her mother tried to hide from the customers. Sarah's father had always been a gentle man, but alcohol made him angry and violent. He started hitting Sarah's mother when he thought no one was looking. He started breaking things in the house when he got mad. He started screaming at Sarah and her younger brother and sister, calling them worthless and stupid. Sarah's mother tried to protect her children, but she was scared too. She had grown up in China and did not speak English very well. She did not know how to get help, and she was afraid that if she called the police, her husband would hurt her even worse. Sarah tried to focus on her music and ignore what was happening at home. She practiced harder and performed more often, hoping that if she became famous enough, her father would be proud and stop drinking. But success only made him more jealous and angry. "You think you're better than us," he would shout at Sarah when she came home from concerts. "You think you're special because people clap for you? But you're nothing without this family." Nothing. The violence got worse. Sarah's mother started wearing long sleeves to hide her bruises. Her little brother, who was only 8, started wetting his bed because he was so scared. Her sister, who was 12, stopped talking and spent all her time hiding in her room. Sarah knew she had to do something, but she was only 16 years old. She did not know how to stop her father from drinking or how to keep her family safe. All she knew was music, and music could not fix this problem. The breaking point came on a cold night in February. Sarah was at home practicing piano when her father came home drunk from the restaurant. He had lost money gambling, and he was angrier than she had ever seen him. "Turn off that noise," he screamed at Sarah. "I'm sick of hearing you bang on those keys." Sarah stopped playing, but it was too late. Her father was already walking toward the piano with a baseball bat in his hands. "You think you're so special," he said, raising the bat above his head. "Let's see how special you are without your precious piano." Sarah's mother tried to stop him, but he pushed her away so hard that she fell and hit her head on the wall. Her little brother and sister started crying and ran to hide in the closet. Sarah stood up from the piano bench and put herself between her father and the piano. "Please, Papa," she said. "Don't do this. The piano isn't mine. We're renting it from the music store." But her father was too drunk and too angry to listen. He swung the bat at the piano keys, smashing several of them. The sound of breaking wood and metal strings filled the house like screaming. "Stop!" Sarah cried. "Please stop!" Her father turned toward her with the bat still in his hands. For a moment, Sarah thought he was going to hit her too. But instead he started crying. "I'm sorry," he sobbed. "I'm so sorry. I don't know why I do these things. I don't mean to hurt anyone." Sarah's mother got up from the floor, blood running from a cut on her forehead. Her brother and sister came out of the closet, still crying. The broken piano sat in the middle of the room like a wounded animal, that night, while her father slept. Off his drinking, Sarah's mother made a decision that would change everything. "We have to leave," she whispered to Sarah. "If we stay, he will kill one of us eventually, maybe all of us." Sarah knew her mother was right, but leaving meant giving up everything. It meant giving up her music career, her scholarships, her dreams of becoming a great pianist. It meant disappearing and starting over with nothing. "What about my concerts?" Sarah asked. "What about music school?" Her mother took Sarah's hands in her own. "Music will always be with you," she said. "But if we don't leave now, you might not be alive to play it." They left that same night, taking only the clothes they could carry in 2 suitcases. Sarah's mother had been saving money secretly for months, hiding it in a coffee can under the kitchen sink. It was enough to buy bus tickets to Los Angeles and pay for a small apartment for a few months. Before they left, Sarah looked back at the broken piano one last time. She knew she would probably never play piano professionally again. Her career was over before it had really begun. The world would forget about Sarah Chun, the young genius who had won the Chopin competition. In Los Angeles, Sarah's mother changed all their names. Sarah Chun became Sarah Martinez. Her brother became Miguel, and her sister became Elena. They spoke only Spanish in public, pretending to be a family from Mexico instead of China. Sarah's mother cleaned houses and worked in restaurants to support them. Sarah wanted to find a piano to practice on, but her mother said it was too dangerous. "If you play piano anywhere, people will recognize you," she explained. "Your father is looking for us. If he finds us, he will kill us all." So Sarah stopped playing piano completely. She got a job cleaning offices after school to help pay for food and rent. She told everyone that she was just a regular girl who was not good at anything special. She buried her musical gifts so deep that sometimes she almost forgot they existed. Years passed. Sarah's brother and sister grew up and moved away to start their own lives with new names and new identities. Sarah's mother got sick and died when Sarah was 30. Sarah was alone in the world, still hiding, still pretending to be someone she was not. Sarah got married to a kind man who did not ask questions about her past. They had 2 children together, Emma and Miguel. When her husband died in a car accident, Sarah was alone again, working 2 jobs to support her family. For 20 years, Sarah Martinez lived a quiet life, cleaning other people's buildings and raising her children. No one knew that she had once been Sarah Chun, the musical prodigy who had amazed the world. No one knew that inside the tired cleaning lady was an artist who had given up everything to keep her family safe. But now, sitting at this piano, playing this music, Sarah could not hide anymore. The music was calling her back to who she really was. Her fingers remembered every lesson, every piece, every feeling that music had ever given her. As she played the final section of the Chopin Ballade, Sarah felt like she was introducing herself to the world for the first time in 20 years. "Hello," the music seemed to say. "My name is Sarah Chun, and I'm a pianist." The final movement of Chopin's Ballade No. 1 began like thunder rolling across the sky. Sarah's hands moved across the keys with power and grace that took everyone's breath away. This was the hardest part of the piece, the part where many professional pianists made mistakes. But Sarah played it like she had been born to do nothing else. The music poured out of the piano like water breaking through a dam. Every note carried 20 years of silence, 20 years of dreams that had been buried, but never died. Sarah's fingers flew across the keys so fast they were almost invisible, but every single note was perfect. The people in the audience forgot how to breathe. They had come expecting to watch a cruel joke, but instead they were witnessing something miraculous. The cleaning lady was not just playing piano, she was making the instrument sing with a voice they had never heard before. Sarah's face was peaceful and focused, like she was having a conversation with an old friend. The piano responded to her touch like it had been waiting 20 years for her to come back. Together, they told a story that made everyone listening feel things they had forgotten they could feel. Jonathan stood beside the piano, his face white with shock. He had spent his whole life studying music, working with the best teachers money could buy. But he had never heard anyone play like this. Sarah was not just technically perfect, she was making music that came from somewhere deeper than technique, somewhere that could not be taught. The melody soared higher and higher, carrying everyone's hearts with it. Sarah played with such passion that tears began to run down her cheeks, but she did not stop. She had held this music inside her for 20 years, and now it was finally free. Every person in the concert hall felt like Sarah was playing just for them, telling them secrets about love and loss and hope that they had never heard before. The music spoke a language that everyone understood, no matter what country they came from or what language they spoke at home. Sarah's left hand played deep, rolling bass notes that sounded like ocean waves, while her right hand danced through the melody like a bird flying above the storm. The two hands worked together perfectly, creating harmony that seemed to heal something broken in everyone who heard it. As the piece built toward its climax, Sarah began to play with even more power. Her whole body moved with the music, swaying gently as her hands brought out every emotion Chopin had written into the notes. She was not just playing the composer's music, she was living it, breathing it, making it part of her own story. The music told of a young girl who had to give up everything she loved to keep her family safe. It spoke of 20 years of cleaning floors and emptying trash cans while musical genius slept inside her heart. It cried out with the pain of dreams deferred and talents hidden away like treasures buried in the ground, but the music also told of strength and survival. It sang of a mother who worked 2 jobs to feed her children. It celebrated the courage it took to keep going when everything seemed hopeless. It honored the sacrifice of putting other people's needs before your own dreams. Robert, the manager, pulled out his phone and started recording. He knew he was witnessing something that would never happen again. The music critics sat with their mouths open, trying to find words for what they were hearing, but failing completely. Sarah reached the most difficult passage in the entire piece, a section where the notes came so fast and furious that it sounded like musical fireworks exploding in the air. Her fingers moved with impossible speed and accuracy, hitting every note exactly right while pouring emotion into each one. The audience held their breath. Even people who knew nothing about classical music could tell that what Sarah was doing was extraordinary. She was not just playing piano, she was performing magic, transforming metal strings and wooden keys into pure feeling. As Sarah played, she thought about her children at home. Emma, who wanted to go to college but worried about money. Miguel, who loved to sing but had never had music lessons. She thought about all the years she had told them that dreams were luxuries they could not afford. But now, Making this music, Sarah realized that dreams were not luxuries at all. Dreams were what kept people alive when everything else seemed lost. Her music had survived 20 years of silence, because dreams that real could never truly die. The final section of the ballad was like a conversation between Sarah's past and her future. The melody looked back at the girl she had been, talented, hopeful, full of plans for a bright tomorrow. But it also looked forward to the woman she was becoming, stronger, wiser, more grateful for the gift that had been returned to her. Sarah's playing became even more intense as she approached the ending. Every note seemed to say something important, something that could not be said with words. The music told the audience that they were not just watching a piano performance. They were witnessing a human being reclaiming her true identity after 20 years in hiding. The people listening began to understand that Sarah was not just an unusually talented cleaning lady. She was something much more rare and precious, a true artist who had been forced to hide her gifts but had never lost them completely. Jonathan realized that everything he thought he knew about music was wrong. He had always believed that success meant being famous and making money and having people praise you. But Sarah was showing him that music was really about truth, about sharing your deepest feelings with other people, about making something beautiful even when your heart was breaking. As the piece rushed toward its conclusion, Sarah played with such power that it seemed like the piano might break apart from the force of her emotion. But the instrument held strong, singing with her voice, adding its own music to her story. The final measures of the ballad contained everything Sarah had learned about life: joy and sorrow, hope and despair, love and loss, all woven together into something that was somehow more beautiful than any of those feelings alone. Sarah's hands prepared for the last few notes, the ones that would end this incredible performance and change her life forever. She knew that when the music stopped, she could never go back to being invisible. The world would know who she really was, and there would be no more hiding. The final chord rang out through the concert hall like a bell, announcing that something important had just happened. Sarah held the chord until the very last echo faded away, and then she lifted her hands from the keys. For a moment there was complete silence. No one moved, no one breathed. The music had been so beautiful, so powerful, that everyone needed a moment to remember where they were and what they had just experienced. Sarah sat at the piano bench with her hands folded in her lap, looking down at the keys that had just helped her tell her story to the world. She felt empty and full at the same time. Empty because she had poured everything into the music, full because she had finally come home to who she really was. The silence stretched on and on, as if the whole world was trying to understand what it had just witnessed. The silence lasted for what felt like forever. Sarah sat at the piano with her hands folded, not daring to look up at the people who had just heard her play. She could feel their eyes on her, but she did not know what they were thinking or what would happen next. Then, somewhere in the back of the concert hall, someone began to clap. It was slow clapping at first, almost careful, as if the person was not sure it was okay to make noise after such beautiful music. But then another person joined in, and another, within seconds. The entire audience was on their feet, clapping and cheering like they had never done before. The sound of their applause filled the concert hall and seemed to go on forever. Some people were crying while they clapped. Others were shaking their heads in amazement, still not believing what they had just heard. Sarah looked up for the first time since she had finished playing. She saw faces filled with wonder and joy and something that looked like gratitude. These people were not just clapping for her music, they were thanking her for sharing something so beautiful and real with them. Robert was recording everything with his phone, his hands shaking with excitement. The music critics were wiping tears from their eyes, all their professional coolness forgotten. The rich people who had come just to be seen somewhere important were clapping like their lives depended on it. But the person Sarah looked at most was Jonathan. The man who had started this whole thing as a cruel joke was standing frozen beside the piano, his face pale and his mouth open. He looked like someone who had just seen a ghost, or maybe someone who had just realized he had been living his whole life wrong. The applause went on and on. People shouted bravo and amazing. Some of them were taking pictures and videos with their phones, though Sarah did not notice this yet. All she could see were the faces of people who had been moved by her music, who had felt something beautiful. Because of what she had shared with them, slowly, the applause began to quiet down, and people started to sit back in their seats. But no one stopped looking at Sarah. They were all waiting to see what would happen next. What she would say, who this incredible woman really was. Jonathan was the first person to speak. He walked slowly towards Sarah, his face full of an emotion. She could not quite read. When he reached the piano bench, he stopped and looked down at her. "Who are you?" he asked quietly. His voice was different now, not mean or mocking like before, but gentle and confused. "Please tell me who you really are." Sarah looked up at him and saw that his eyes were red, like he had been crying. She realized that her music had affected him just as much as it had affected everyone else. Maybe even more, because he was a musician and understood what he had just witnessed. "My name is Sarah Chun," she said quietly. It felt strange to say her real name out loud after so many years of being Sarah Martinez. "I used to be a pianist, a long time ago." One of the music critics stood up in his seat. He was an older man, with white hair, who had been writing about classical music for 30 years. "Sarah Chun," he repeated, like he was trying to remember something. "Wait, Sarah Chun from San Francisco. The girl who won the Chopin competition when she was 16. Sarah nodded, feeling her face get hot with embarrassment. She had hoped that maybe no one would remember her, that 20 years would have been long enough for the world to forget about the young prodigy who had disappeared. "But that was 20 years ago," the critic continued. "You just vanished. No one knew what happened to you. The music world looked for you everywhere." "I had to disappear," Sarah said simply. "I had no choice." Jonathan knelt down beside the piano bench so he could look directly into Sarah's eyes. "I am so sorry," he said, and now Sarah could see that there were tears on his cheeks. "I thought I was making fun of a cleaning lady who didn't know anything about music. I had no idea. I never would have." "It's okay," Sarah said, though. Part of her was still hurt by how cruel he had been. "You didn't know." "No, it's not okay," Jonathan said firmly. "What I did was wrong no matter who you were. Making fun of someone, trying to embarrass them in front of other people, that's never okay. But the fact that you were... He shook his head, unable to finish the sentence. Robert came running down from the audience, his phone still in his hand. "Sarah, I recorded your performance. This is incredible. The whole world needs to hear this." "Do you realize what just happened here?" Sarah looked confused. "What do you mean?" "I mean, you just gave one of the most beautiful piano performances I have ever heard in my life," Robert said, his words coming out fast and excited. "And I've heard everyone, all the greatest pianists in the world, but what you just did, that was something special. That was art." The music critics were all talking at once now, their voices excited and amazed. "We have to write about this," one of them said. "The return of Sarah Chun. The greatest comeback in classical music history." "Wait," another critic said. "If you're Sarah Chun, why are you working as a cleaning lady? What happened to your career?" Sarah felt overwhelmed by all the questions and attention. For 20 years, she had been invisible, and now suddenly everyone wanted to know everything about her. She stood up from the piano bench, feeling dizzy and confused. I can't," she said. "This is too much. I need to go home to my children." Jonathan stood up too and gently put his hand on her arm. "Sarah, please don't run away again. The world lost you once already. We can't let that happen again." "But I'm not a concert pianist anymore," Sarah said. "I'm just a cleaning lady with 2 kids and bills to pay. I work 2 jobs just to keep food on the table. I don't belong in this world anymore." "You belong wherever there's music," said the older music critic. "What you just played, that wasn't the performance of someone who used to be a pianist. That was the performance of someone who is a pianist, who has always been a pianist, even when she was mopping floors." Robert was scrolling through his phone excitedly. Sarah, I'm already getting calls. Word is spreading about what happened here tonight. People want to know about you, want to hear you play. Sarah shook her head. I don't understand. It was just one song. It wasn't just one song, Jonathan said quietly. It was 20 years of music that you kept alive inside your heart, even when you couldn't play it. It was the most honest, most beautiful thing I have ever heard. The small audience began to gather around the stage, everyone wanting to talk. To Sarah, to tell her how her music had made them feel. But Sarah felt scared and overwhelmed. She had spent so long hiding that she did not know how to handle this much attention. I should go, she said, looking toward the exit. My children are waiting for me. Wait, Jonathan said. At least tell me. Why did you disappear? What happened 20 years ago? Sarah looked at all the faces watching her, waiting for her answer. These people had just heard her pour her heart out through music, but they still did not understand the price she had paid for their safety and her family's survival. Sometimes, Sarah said slowly, you have to choose between your dreams and protecting the people you love. I chose my family. Jonathan nodded like he was beginning to understand. And now? What will you choose now? Sarah looked back at the piano, then at the faces of the people who had been moved by her music. For the first time in 20 years, she had a choice to make that was about hope instead of fear. I don't know, she said honestly. I need time to think. As Sarah gathered her cleaning supplies and prepared to leave, she could hear people already making phone calls, already spreading the word about what they had witnessed. She knew that by tomorrow, her quiet life would be over forever, but for the first time in 20 years, she was not sure if that was something to be afraid of or something to celebrate. Sarah walked home that night in a daze, her cleaning supplies feeling heavier than usual. The city streets looked the same as always, but everything felt different. She kept hearing the music in her head, kept feeling the keys under her fingers, kept remembering the faces of the people who had listened to her play when she opened the door to her small apartment. Emma and Miguel were waiting for her at the kitchen table, doing their homework. They looked up when she came in, and Emma immediately noticed that something was wrong. Mom, you look weird, Emma said. What happened at work? Why are you so late? Sarah sat down at the table with her children and tried to figure out how to explain what had just happened. How do you tell your teenage daughter and 8-year-old son that their mother, who has spent their entire lives working as a cleaning lady, used to be a famous pianist? Something happened tonight, Sarah began slowly. Something I never expected. Miguel looked up from his coloring book. What kind of something? Sarah took a deep breath. I played piano tonight, in front of people. Emma frowned. Mom, you don't know how to play piano. Actually, Sarah said, I do. I used to play piano a long time ago, before you were born. Before I met your father, I was was pretty good at it. Miguel's eyes got wide. Really? Can you teach me? I always wanted to learn piano. Sarah felt her heart break a little. She had always told her children they could not afford music lessons, could not afford a piano, could not afford dreams like that. But now, maybe things would be different. We'll see, she said, hugging Miguel close. Maybe we'll see. That night, after her children were asleep, Sarah sat by her window and looked out at the city lights. She thought about the choice she had made 20 years ago and the choice she might have to make now. Her phone, which almost never rang, had been buzzing all evening with calls from numbers she did not recognize. The next morning, Sarah woke up to find reporters standing outside her apartment building. Someone had found out where she lived and told the newspapers about her story. She peeked through her window and saw TV cameras and people with microphones waiting for her to come outside. Emma came into the kitchen rubbing her eyes. Mom! Why? Are there so many people outside? And why is our phone ringing so much? Before Sarah could answer, there was a knock at the door. Sarah opened it carefully and found Jonathan standing in the hallway. He looked like he had not slept all night. I'm sorry to bother you so early, he said, but I wanted to talk to you before all of this gets too crazy. Sarah led him into her apartment, and Emma stared at him suspiciously. He was clearly rich and important, not the kind of person who usually visited their home. Sarah, Jonathan said. "I've been thinking all night about what happened. About what I did to you, and about what you did with your music. I want to help you, if you'll—" "Let me? Help me how?" Sarah asked. Jonathan pulled out his phone and showed her a video. It was her performance from the night before, recorded by Robert. "This has been shared thousands of times already," he said. "People all over the world are watching it. They want to know about you, want to hear more of your music." Sarah watched, herself on the small screen, hardly believing that the woman playing piano with such skill and passion was really her. "I look different," she said quietly. "You look like who you really are," Jonathan replied. "Sarah, I have an idea. I'm supposed to perform at Carnegie Hall tomorrow night. What if you performed with me?" Sarah nearly dropped the phone. "What? No, I can't do that. I haven't practiced in 20 years. I don't have the right clothes. I don't even have a piano to practice on." "We can fix all of that," Jonathan said. "But more importantly, the world needs to hear your music. What you did last night, that was a gift. You can't hide that gift anymore." Emma had been listening to their conversation with growing amazement. "Mom," she said slowly, "are you actually famous?" Sarah looked at her daughter and realized there was no point in hiding anymore. "I used to be," she said, "a long time ago." Over the next few hours, Sarah's small apartment filled with people. Robert came with contracts from record companies. Music critics came with questions about where she had been and what she had been doing. A woman from a fancy store came with beautiful dresses for Sarah to try on. But the most important visitor was an older woman named Mrs. Patterson, who ran a music school for children who could not afford lessons. She had seen the video of Sarah's performance and had an idea. "I know you're being offered a lot of opportunities right now," Mrs. Patterson said to Sarah, "but I want to offer you something different. I want to offer you a chance to teach." Sarah was interested. Teaching had always seemed like something she might enjoy, though she had never thought she was qualified to do it. "Many of the children who come to my school have stories like yours," Mrs. Patterson continued. "They have talent, but they also have difficult lives. They need someone who understands what it's like to have dreams that seem impossible." Sarah looked around her apartment at all the important people making big offers and expensive promises. Then she looked at Miguel, who was still hoping she would teach him to play piano. "Can I think about everything?" Sarah asked. "All of these offers, all of these opportunities." "It's a lot to process," Jonathan nodded. "Of course, but Sarah, please don't disappear again. Whatever you decide to do, don't hide your music anymore." That evening, after everyone had left, Sarah sat at her kitchen table with Emma and Miguel. The reporters were still outside, but she ignored them. "Kids," she said, "our life is about to change. I don't know exactly how, but things are going to be different. Good different or bad different?" Miguel asked. Sarah smiled. I hope good different." 6 months later, Sarah Chun stood on the stage of Carnegie Hall, wearing a beautiful black dress and looking out at an audience of 2,000 people. But this was not the concert Jonathan had originally planned. Instead of performing alone, Sarah was on stage with 20 of her students from Mrs. Patterson's music school. Some of them were playing piano, others violin, others singing. All of them had stories of struggle and hardship, just like Sarah. Sarah had decided to return to music, but not in the way everyone expected. Instead of becoming a touring concert pianist, she became a teacher and performer who used her music to help other people find their own voices. She performed at important concerts, but she also played at schools and community centers. She made recordings, but she also taught children whose families could barely afford food, let alone music lessons. Emma was in the audience that night at Carnegie Hall, watching her mother with pride and amazement. She was starting college in the fall. Her tuition paid for by the money her mother was now earning from her music. Miguel was also there, and in just 6 months, he had learned to play piano well enough to perform a simple piece with his mother's students. Jonathan was there too, sitting in the front row. He had become Sarah's friend and sometimes performed with her at concerts like this one. Her music had taught him what it really meant to be an artist, And he was a better musician because of knowing her. As Sarah played the final notes of Chopin's Ballade. No, the same piece that had changed her life 6 months before. She looked out at the audience and saw faces filled with the same wonder and joy she had seen that first night. But now she also saw something else in those faces. She saw hope. She saw people who understood that it was never too late to find your way back to who you were meant to be. When the concert ended and the audience rose to their feet in thunderous applause, Sarah thought about the choice she had made 20 years ago to protect her family. She thought about the choice she had made 6 months ago to stop hiding. Both choices had been right for their time. Both choices had led her to this moment, standing on one of the world's most famous stages, surrounded by young musicians whose lives she was helping to change. Sarah Chun had finally come home, not just to music, but to herself, and this time, she was never going to leave again. The cleaning lady was gone forever. In her place stood a teacher, a performer, and most importantly, an artist who had learned that the most beautiful music comes not from perfection, but from the courage to be who you really are. As Sarah took her final bow, she whispered a quiet thank you to the music that had waited for her, to the family she had protected, to the children she was now teaching, and to the man who had challenged her as a joke and accidentally given her back her life. Sometimes the best gifts come wrapped in the most unexpected packages. Sometimes the cruelest moments lead to the most beautiful discoveries. And sometimes it takes 20 years of hiding to learn that the most important thing you can do is be brave enough to let the world see who you really are.